So I want to welcome everyone. It's 5:59, and because we have 3 cameras rolling, at 6 we're going to try to keep the live stream on schedule. My name is Gregory Howell, and I started off the series with tunnels, brothels, and bars, oh my. And we now have a waiting list of almost 600 people to hear that lecture again. I hate to say lecture, but it's great thought leadership in speakeasy culture. So it's a lot of fun. But I am going to be doing that for the Pueblo County Historical Society. I'm also going to be doing it for the Heritage Museum. So in September and November, look out for the dates. We're still doing that. I know the Pueblo County Historical Society is doing it at the Country Club, and the Heritage Museum, we're going to take over the depot, and that'll be in November. So just stay tuned. So if you were on the list and you came to the first one or a second or any of these, I'll be sending out more information. But just to give you a little information, the reason that this series just felt so appropriate is we've all been in our kind of pandemic caves for the past year plus, and 2 things that we can do in our community is tell stories and break bread. And I just think that's a wonderful way for us, and especially here in Pueblo. I've only been in Pueblo for 10 years, and in those 10 years, I mean, it feels like 1,000. I mean, the stories are amazing. So I plan on dying here because I'll probably be uncovering rocks on my last day, thinking, "Oh my gosh, here's another story, another story." But in any case, I want to give a shout out to the entire Senate Bar family. Ken and his wife are back there in the back, and the whole front team too. They're extraordinary. And then, as I said, we have 3 cameras. We have 3 cameras going, and this is the same crew that put together the Rocky Mountain PBS documentary on the Great 1921 Flood. So, and that was extraordinary. If you haven't seen it, there's a lot of spoiler alerts, so I won't tell you anything. You got to watch it. But this is being broadcast live, and then when the event is over, it will be on YouTube. And we're working with schools and superintendents and both D60 and D70 and some private schools to actually create supporting curriculum for this series, because these truly are incredible Pueblo stories. And we just want to make sure that they're preserved and preserved well. And that's why this team with Justin Brager and his team, they're doing an incredible job. So I'm going to open up my phone here because I want to make sure I get all of the information about our special speaker, Peggy Runco Wilcox. And I met Peggy about 10 years ago when I first moved to Pueblo, and I lived at Central Plaza, right in the historic Tut building, across from where Legacy Bank is, the triangular Flatiron building. And I was so amazed because I was working in the historic Federal building at 5th and Main, and I would walk back and forth, and there were all these amazing sculptures, all these amazing pieces of fine art. And I came to Pueblo to open up a network of healthcare clinics, and we opened up 8 in the first 18 months all throughout Colorado and Texas. So I thought I would be on my way. But no, there was other things for me to do, and I opened up an art gallery. So I've always had a passion for art, and lo and behold, Peggy was the ambassador, the creator. I mean, you were the repair person. You did just about everything for Art and Soul, which is an amazing program that went on for 15 years? About 15 years. So that's how I met Peggy. And sadly, when the program kind of came to a close, what's really amazing is when you see these beautiful sculptures for 15 years and you kind of take them for granted, they become invisible. And then when someone decides to take them away, they become really visible because you want them back. And so it's kind of a bittersweet story.
Right.
But Peggy is a Pueblo native from a large Italian-American family. And
Yes.
Peggy and her husband have 3 terrific children and consider themselves truly fortunate to spend time with their 4 young grandsons. Previously, Peggy enjoyed a 30-year career as a banker and has loved being a realtor for the last 11 years.
Yes.
She has been privileged to serve on a number of community boards and projects. As a lifelong history buff, Peggy has especially enjoyed being part of the Pueblo County Historical Society and has served on the board for over 20 years. Over the years, Peggy has written a number of articles for the Pueblo County Historical Society monthly publication, The Lore, which I love. Recently, she completed a 9-month project researching and writing for the Pueblo County Historical Society's book, Mad River, commemorating the 100th anniversary of the 1921 Great Flood of Pueblo. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Peggy and pass, you've got your own mic, so I'm going to take this with me. But everyone enjoy the presentation, and then we have time for questions and answers afterwards. And take it away, Peggy.
Thank you. So I want to thank Gregory because he has energy that is just unbelievable. And he just keeps coming up with great ideas to promote Pueblo and to encourage people to appreciate Pueblo. And I love that. And I love the back room of the Senate. It's awesome. Thank you. So as Gregory said, I was a banker, I've been a realtor for a number of years, but I've been a history buff forever. My dad was a history buff, so it's probably, in my DNA. And I have served on the Pueblo Historical Society board and been able to research and write articles on lots of different fun subjects. But 2020, as you may know, was the 150th anniversary of Pueblo. So we were incorporated as a town in 1870, so 150 years ago. And in researching for articles about that, I learned a lot. Not just about those early years, but probably about Pueblo today. So I have a question before I start. Oh, let me click. I forgot to click. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Oh, no, I clicked too much. Okay, wait. Uh-oh. There's always got to be a glitch, right? For your entertainment. Okay. So the photos in my presentation are courtesy of the Historical Society for the most part. All right, so before I start, do we have any newcomers to Pueblo? Anybody been here less than a couple years? Welcome. Awesome.
I was born here,
But you came back. That happens a lot, honestly. So how about natives like myself? Whoa. So for many, many years, Pueblo was kind of an anomaly within the state of Colorado because of that percentage of natives that we have. So I don't know if it's still, higher than most places, but I suspect, just based on our room, that it likely is. So newcomer or native, I think you'll probably agree that Pueblo kind of has what I call quirks, right? So, for example, for one thing, we have a very open arm, welcoming attitude to newcomers. Pueblo is known for being very friendly. That's how we hooked Gregory over here, right? So, but at the same time, a little bit contradictory, we tend to be pretty skeptical about anything new. New events, new businesses, new projects. Kind of skeptical, right? So now this question, have you ever been asked what high school you attended? Should be fairly unanimous, right? And if you haven't, I'm not sure where you've been. So the other side, of course, is that nobody cares where you went to college. We just don't care. You could be a Rhodes Scholar. We just don't care. So, so one of the things, have you ever wondered why there's such an attitude of competition or rivalry between Pueblo and Denver? Anybody ever wondered why? Besides me? Right? How about, have you ever thought Pueblo sometimes has a chip on its shoulder? Anybody ever think that? You're nodding, you just don't want to raise your hand. Okay. And then, you know, my favorite topic, and Gregory's going to make shirts. 1 degree of separation. That is such a Pueblo thing. Give us 10 minutes with anybody, and we will find at least one connection. And if we don't find that in 10 minutes, give us 20 minutes, and we'll find 2, because that's Pueblo, right? So as I said, Gregory wants to make shirts that say 1 degree of separation. But so we find some of those quirks amusing. Some are frustrating, maybe, maddening, perhaps, endearing. But we all know that Pueblo has those quirks. So in researching 1870, I think I found some common themes. And I think you'll recognize them too. So sometimes the more things change, that's right. So I'm going to take advantage of this little stool here. And it's kind of got a crooked, so hopefully I won't fall over. If I do, you can stop filming, okay? Okay, so look at that. So Pueblo County was one of the original 17 counties established in the Colorado Territory in 1861. And though it was the county seat, Pueblo was still a very small settlement. That was basically it. And it struggled to kind of maintain a population through all of the 1860s. But by 1870, it had met some milestones. So the official recorded population was 666, right? Now the county population was just over 2,200. But keep in mind, what you see here was basically it. There were a couple more blocks to the south on Santa Fe. This is Santa Fe Avenue, by the way. Pueblo grew out from Santa Fe, not from Main Street. So other than a couple more blocks to the south, to about 1st or 2nd Street, this is it. Everything else was county. So, sorry. Oh, I have this tea. Let me see if that helps. So, as I said, there were some milestones in 1870. There was a post office, a telegraph line. There were a few hotels, like this one. This was the Valley House on about 2nd and Santa Fe, later called the Drovers. Anybody ever hear of the Drovers? Yeah. There were retail and wholesale businesses. There were 3 churches. This was the first one on the left, St. Peter's at 7th and Santa Fe. And we also had a courthouse. Not much of a courthouse, admittedly, but a courthouse. We also had a board of trade, which was kind of an economic development organization that was marketing Pueblo far and wide. And then we also had a very successful newspaper. Anybody want to guess its name? Chieftain, correct. Of course, back then it was known as the Colorado Weekly Chieftain. So a major milestone was achieved on March 22nd, 1870, when in accordance with the desire of almost all the citizens that was set forth in a petition, Pueblo filed incorporation documents to officially become a town as defined by the territorial government. So that first election after the incorporation was on April 4th, so pretty close after. And the election was held to select the town trustees, sort of city council, as well as fill the other city offices. So according to the chieftain, there were 2 tickets represented in that election. The people's ticket, which was composed of all Republicans, and the city ticket, also composed of all Republicans, except for 2. So, you know, in theory they had 2 parties, but in practice not so much. What would we say about Pueblo today? In theory we have 2 parties, but in practice not so much. Only the name of the party has changed, right? It's now the Democratic Party. So then as now, the condition of the streets was a big deal for Puebloans. Big deal. Oh, let me show the streets. Those are the streets. Maintenance was number 1 on their list. And this is how that very first Board of Town Trustees handled it. Be it resolved, be it ordained by the Board of Trustees of the Town of Pueblo that every male resident of the town over the age of 21 and under the age of 60 shall labor for 2 days on the streets. I like it. So I've shared this idea with Mayor Gratishar, but he's chosen to take a different path, right? Since its inception, though, in 1869, the Board of Trade, remember, kind of the economic development organization, was busy sending out correspondence and businessmen to call on railroads, trying to get somebody to bring a train to Pueblo. They saw that as critical to Pueblo's survival, which indeed it probably was. So finally, in early 1871, the Board of Trade attracted the attention of this guy, General William Jackson Palmer, and his Denver and Rio Grande Railroad. So initially, the DNRG's goal was to go from Denver to points west, and from Denver south to Raton, and then on to terminate in El Paso, Texas. The original route, however, was to go from Denver to Old Colorado City in El Paso County, and then on to Canyon City, bypassing Pueblo, right? So that fateful day in early 1871, Palmer sent one of his associates, A.L. Hunt, who also happened to be a previous territorial governor, sent Mr. Hunt to Pueblo to meet with the Board of Trade and city leaders. And their proposal was the DNRG might, just might, change their plans and alter their route and come to Pueblo if Pueblo would buy $100,000 in Denver and Rio Grande bonds. Right? So they held a special election and the citizens agreed. It was that important. Now, $100,000 in 1871 was equivalent to about $2 million now. So they voted yes. The DNRG started building, and then a few months later, the track was still about 12 miles north of town, and the DNRG came back. Anybody want to guess what they said? We need more money. So they asked for another $50,000. Once again, the townspeople agreed, and then the first train finally arrived to lots of cheering and was celebrated at the Pueblo County Courthouse the new and very much improved Pueblo County Courthouse in July of 1872. So there again, any of that story sound a little bit familiar? It should. PEDCO has been using citizen-supported half-cent sales tax funds since the 80s, 1980s, to give monetary incentives to companies to come to Pueblo. Not a lot different. What is different, however, is that what Palmer did after the railroad was here, he immediately bought up a portion of the Nolan land grant and built his own town just across the Arkansas River from Pueblo. So the folks in Old Pueblo that ponied up the money to bring the railroad now had to compete with Palmer's town just across the Arkansas River from Pueblo. But the railroad did have the desired effect. So Pueblo's population boomed from just under 700 in 1870 to over 3,000 in 1873. So part of that also was due to the fact that we also attracted Palmer's chief competitor. The Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad was also in Pueblo by that time. But still, look at that percentage of population growth. Wow. So 300 buildings were erected in that time frame. So in just under 3 years, 300 buildings, including these. So the People's National Bank at 6th and Main, which, by the way, the basics of that building are still there. Y'all are going to want to drive by there and go, what? But they are. And then the First National Bank was at 4th and Santa Fe. And then Charles Goodnight's Stock Growers Bank was in the 400 block of Santa Fe. So everywhere, the old wooden buildings were being torn down and replaced by more substantial and more permanent, which was the key, brick. So the town trustees looked around and said, oh, this is good, and proudly proclaimed by ordinance on March 23rd, 1873, so just almost exactly 3 years later, that by virtue of the laws of the territory of Colorado, the town of Pueblo will now be known and designated as the city of Pueblo. Woo, a city, right? But also in 1873, a specially appointed Colorado Territorial Government Task Force printed a comprehensive multi-page pamphlet that was widely distributed throughout the states. Now keep in mind, we're a territory. So we're not the states, isn't that funny? So primarily it was sent east. But the goal of that was really to highlight all of Colorado's wonderful assets. It was a marketing piece developed to encourage visitors and settlers to move to Colorado. There was only one problem. Pueblo was not included at all. So the pamphlet was split into sections, and the Southern Colorado section included the cities of Colorado Springs and Canyon City and Old Colorado City, and it even included Los Animas and Conejos. But Pueblo, not a single mention. So of course, here was Pueblo, the second largest city in the state, and currently a rival to Denver as a railroad hub and for commercial development, and one of the oldest settlements, right? Totally left out. So of course, the leaders and the townspeople complained, but oops, too late. It had already been sent out. And unfortunately, I think the damage was done. So How many of you remember Rodney Dangerfield? Remember him? You remember one of his most famous lines? That's exactly right. And I think this was the beginning of Pueblo's, we just can't get any respect, man. So in 1874, we came close, though. A bill to move the capital of the Colorado Territory from Denver to Pueblo passed what was the House then, the representatives of the 10th Legislative Territorial Assembly on January 31st. So again, January 31st, 1874. And Puebloans, of course, were jubilant. How exciting. And they felt sure that it would pass, that we had the votes in the Senate. Well, of course, the Denver papers immediately started trash-talking the idea, right? And saying all the reasons why that would never work. And the Rocky Mountain News began their coverage by insulting Pueblo. And its citizens, they insulted the citizens, the chieftain, and the water. What? This is what they said. Pueblo's population is hardly worth mentioning. Its products are mere schemes. And all they want to do is remove the capital and jealous attacks on Denver. Their water is so bad that many of the most respectable citizens prefer to always drink beer and whiskey. Right? And it got worse from there. So then the news figured out how to spin it, right? To ensure its defeat. Money. So it came up with the idea that if the capital was moved, then the land that had been donated by Henry Brown in Denver would revert back to Mr. Brown. And they said, can the territory afford to lose $50,000, which is obviously what they valued the land that Brown had donated? Can the territory afford to lose $50,000 for the fun of moving the capital? So the chieftain answered back, claiming that it would donate an even bigger and better site for the capital. To which the news replied, but land in Pueblo isn't worth anything. And the chieftain fired back, of course. The value of the land in Denver has been widely overstated. And the difference, if any, is a mere $5,000. And they boasted that amount, no doubt, could be raised here in half an hour. Well, you know, in today's world, we read that and we think, it would take you a whole half hour to raise $5,000? But then that was a dig, right? I mean, that was a boast. We could do it in a half hour. And we came so close. But in the end, the bill was defeated by a vote of 7-5 in the Senate of the legislature. The chieftain suspected dirty dealing and, in fact, alleged vote buying from one of our neighbors to the south out of Trinidad. But the editor of the paper finally said, it's okay, don't worry. Don't worry. Because, and this is what their logic, right? Because when the state, or when Colorado becomes a state, Pueblo will have another opportunity. Oh, I think I forgot to click. Pueblo will have another opportunity to become the capital of the state. How'd that work out? Yeah, not so much. So this is the state capital, not long after it was completed in 1890-something. and on the land, just a couple of blocks from Henry Brown's Brown Palace Hotel. Imagine that. So, what do you think about that Denver rivalry? Right? Yeah. So then in October of 1875, on his last visit to the state, President Ulysses S. Grant actually spent several days in the state of Colorado. He spent 2 hours in Pueblo. And the chieftain reported, and I quote, "Grant made a most brilliant speech at the Lindell Hotel. It was rather short. All he said the whole time is, 'Bring me my coat.' He didn't even want to hear our music." Oh. And the chieftain continued, "For our part, we would rather tip our hat and shake the hand of our own mayor any day of the week than with that uncivil man with the fat cigar." So the lesson for me is that, and I think it's probably still true, we're just not that impressed. We don't care about your fame. We don't care about your title. Don't come around here disparaging our community, ignoring our hospitality, refusing to listen to our music. What? And I might add, for the modern era, show some respect for Pueblo chili pepper, right? So in 1876, Puebloans supported a school bond issue to replace the old adobe school that had been built in 1869 at 11th and Court with a new modern school to be named Centennial. I gotta hear the yay, go Bulldogs, right? It's Pueblo, right? You gotta hear that. So it would be named Centennial in recognition of the country's 100th birthday. The plans for the school were impressive, and the costs were high. But it was seen as a huge improvement, which indeed it was, and further proof of the city's prosperity. Unfortunately, the school board treasurer, who also happened to be the county clerk, absconded with the funds. Stole them all, or almost all. So his name was Sam McBride. He was actually very well known, been here for a few years. He had at one point been the owner of the Chieftain for a short time. He was one of the first men elected to the Board of Trustees, and he had lots of friends in high places, both in Pueblo and outside of Pueblo. So his list of bondsmen, and you all understand that the bondsmen were there so that if something like that happened, they'd pay up, right? His list of bondsmen read like a who's who of Pueblo. It included a couple of judges. It included George Chilcott, who had been a territorial legislator, would soon be a state legislature later, that. And eventually a United States Senator. It included Henry Thatcher, who was soon to be named the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in Colorado. It included J.N. Carlisle, the sheriff, the city attorney, and the chieftain owner, J.J. Lambert. All of those bondsmen never paid a dime. Yeah. So the city was, or the community was left having no choice but to shut down construction and cancel classes until they could figure it out, how to raise the money to finish that project. And they eventually did. And the school opened, well, actually, they eventually raised money and then got a loan from the Thatchers at the First National Bank for the remainder. But the school opened on, hold on, let me find the date. January 9th, 1878. So about 2 years later, the school was finally done. The kids were back in school. And look at that beautiful building. Go Bulldogs, right? So it is remarkable, though, that Puebloans would ever revisit a school bond after that experience. But we have, many times, including most recently 2019, right? I think given a good cause, i.e. schools, flood control, economic development, the Puebloans have a long history of showing that they are willing to support the things they think really matter, right? So later in 1876, that uncivil man with the big fat cigar, President Grant, signed the Enabling Act, and Colorado became a state. So the Centennial State, of course, and that was on August 1st, 1876. But less than a year later, trouble, little trouble on the horizon. In June of 1877, the Pueblo chieftain printed a revolutionary, might even say radical, idea. Secession. What? Right? Several southern Colorado counties and the people that lived there, miners, ranchers, farmers, regular citizens, wanted a divorce or at least a legal separation from the northern part of the state. The proposal advocated that Colorado be redrawn with the northern counties to remain Colorado and the southern counties to be the brand new territory of San Juan. So San Juan would include all the counties south of the Palmer Divide. So that it would include the towns of Manitou, Colorado Springs, Old Colorado City, Pueblo, and all of these communities. I don't know if you can see that. But at the time, this is where mining was booming. Telluride, Lake City, Red Mountain, Ouray, all around kind of Del Norte. Del Norte's off to the east a little bit. But those towns were booming. So the proponents of the idea, as well as others, felt certain that based on mining booming the way it was in the southern counties, and based on Pueblo's becoming an industrial hub, that the population in those southern counties would soon rival the population in the shrunken state of Colorado. So proponents reminded citizens that many southern counties were not in favor of statehood in the first place, and that statehood had burdened them with increased taxes while they had less representation. The complaint centered around the fact that none of the governor's administration and none of our congressional representatives were from the southern part of the state. So the chieftain didn't just publish this idea, it was an active proponent, citing irrevocable differences. And I quote here, "There perhaps is no two parts of any state in the Union so unnaturally linked together as the counties north and south of the divide in Colorado, in climate, in population, in economy, and in wealth." Then they continued, they claimed, Northern Coloradoans were guilty of an arrogant assumption of superiority. Now, northern New Mexico counties heard this proposal and immediately said, "We're in. have much more in common with the southern counties of Colorado than we do or ever will have with those snobs in Santa Fe. Actually, I think they called them crooked snobs. So then a July 4th production in Pueblo continued the theme, accusing the people of the North for harboring a spirit of aggrandizement that would make all portions of the state subservient to their own, for building up one section and impoverishing another, an unbounded egotism shown on all occasions. Whoa, whoa. So the production concluded with the recitation of a poem by a humorist who was pretending to be an emissary from Governor John Rout. No, oh, wait. Governor John Rout was kind of petite, right? So here's the poem, a little bit condensed. From the land of the frozen north I come, where the office holder has his home, where the sportive senator makes his lair, and short is the route, get it, to the governor's chair, where debts are made and taxes laid, but the devilish cent is ever paid, where land sharks and sharpers are common as dirt, and millions are stolen and nobody hurt. Where legislatures for 5 months last, and only the Lord only knows what acts they've passed. Right? You could probably publish that poem today, except for the Governor Rout stuff. But by the end of the year, the idea seemed to be fizzling out. So again, the year is 1877. So either the idea was fizzling out or they met, as deals often do, in the back room somewhere, right? And, you know, Pueblo knows how to play that game. We know about backroom politics, and we know how to deal when we have to. So with the support of Denver politicians, Frederick W. Pitkin, who happened to be a lawyer from Ouray, in the heart of San Juan territory, was elected the governor. And Pueblo was promised that a local politician, George Chilcott, would be appointed by the state senate to the office of U.S. Senate in 1878. And keep in mind, back then, senators were appointed by state legislators, not voted. So that was the promise, that the state legislature would appoint Chilcott to the United States Senate. It did not happen. Right. But that's kind of another story. Governor Pitkin, by the way, served 2 terms and then retired to Pueblo. Hurrah for Governor Pitkin, right? So I'm probably kind of out of time, but I want to say that the remainder of that very first decade has some great stories, and I think you'll find they're even more fun than these, in a way. So I encourage you, dig a little deeper. You like that? Dig a little deeper. Get it? Yeah. So here's a few more stories to discover. There's this guy. Ooh. So I can tell you that the rest of the country was fooled by him. Pueblo? Yeah, not so much. We're too skeptical, right? Anybody know who this is? That's right, Solid Muldoon. And again, that was 1877. And then in 1879, here we go. Here's George Chilcott. And you can learn about his betrayal and how it's connected to the state insane asylum being put in Pueblo in 1879. So I'll give you a hint. The state insane asylum in 1879 was in 1878 George Chilcott's house. Right? And then there's these guys. I kind of love these guys. Bat Masterson, Dirty Dave Rudabaugh. Oh, he looks like Dirty Dave, doesn't he? And the guy on the end is the notorious Ben Thompson from Texas. Now, what do you suppose these gunslingers were doing in Pueblo in 1879? They were taking a stand, I can tell you. Anybody know why they were here? Royal Gorge Railroad Wars, which is a wonderful story. If you don't know it, you need to look it up. It's awesome. And then 1879, 1880, you have Palmer back, consolidating companies to form the Colorado Coal and Iron Company, which would become the CF&I. So that's the birth of the steel mill, which of course changed the face of Pueblo forever. Not the air. The air is okay now. Well, not today so much, but usually the air is okay. So back to those Pueblo quirks. Don't you love this picture? So I'd say if Pueblo has a chip on its shoulder, it earned it, right? I'm not saying that we are stuck in the past or that we're forever damned to keep repeating the same thing over and over, like that Groundhog movie, whatever, remember? But I'm saying rather that the past provides us insights, hints, sometimes compelling reasons for our community's traits. Not just our quirks, but our traits, right? It's pride, our community's pride, our resilience, our pragmatism, our skepticism, and our get back up and fight another day obstinacy. That's very much a Pueblo trait. And those traits have served us well when you think about pandemics, the steel mills decline, and the biggest of all trying times, I guess, the 1921 flood. Those traits served us very well. So, you know, as Gregory said, I worked for a number of months researching that 1921 tragedy, and we wrote a book, Mad River, commemorating the 100th anniversary of the 1921 flood. And I can tell you, I sincerely believe that there are other towns that would not have survived that devastation. But we did. It was our resilience, our faith, and that obstinacy that pulled us through. Well, that and these guys, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, they were here in force. So this photo, even though it says June 3rd, was actually taken a couple weeks after the flood. And you see they're still digging mud. And they've got a steam shovel. And what I love about it, you recognize where it is? Yeah, right outside the front door, right? I love that. So one of my favorite quotes from the chieftain, just days after that devastating flood, said, "An unconquerable spirit builds success out of the materials of disaster. It's not the flood that's going to decide what the Pueblo of the future shall be. It's the men and women of Pueblo who will choose for this city the destiny of their children and grandchildren to share." Do you love that? As children and grandchildren of those flood survivors. Do you love that? So I encourage you again. Yep, dig a little deeper, right, Gregory? After all, it's not just history. This is our story. And I'm done. Thank you very much. So does anybody have questions?
Any questions?
I'm kind of glad nobody from Denver's here, right? Maybe I should have asked that.
I have to explain to my friend from Denver that Pueblo's not a third world country, right?
It's true. Well, and you know, I just closed on a loan today for my niece and nephew are actually moving here from Denver, back from Denver.
Isn't it funny how people are coming to Pueblo now?
Yes. Well, and part of it, and for them,
Can afford to live here.
yes, and for them specifically, they cashed out and made a ton of money on their house. And the pandemic proved they could work from home, which they will. But we had a conversation about how many of their friends and coworkers gave them a bad time. And guess how many? All of them. Pueblo, why would you go to Pueblo? So that, you know, I think in a way being misunderstood has kind of been a defense for us in some ways. But I think it's time to get rid of that. Time to change that.
Well, I've only lived here 10 years, and I lecture about Pueblo in the United States and overseas, and the stories are truly world class. It's not very often that you have empire builders like the Rockefellers and Guggenheims, and of course that's the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yes.
But when I talk about the ugly, I consider it messy. And it's that messiness, though, that really is where all the humanity is in any good story. So I just want to thank you, Peggy. I have a lot more homework to do. And I love the pictures, too.
Aren't they
And I know
great?
with each one of those comes a much deeper story. And I can already think of, we already have, as a result of just 3 of these evenings, we've had 9 specialists from throughout the state who heard about the dig and would love to share. 2 professors from Boulder, who are experts on Pueblo, apparently. But in any case,
That is shocking.
I love the notion, though, that, you know, people are really interested in just hearing the stories. And, you know, we're not going to be getting on, well, some people are already getting on airplanes, but not everyone is going to get on an airplane and travel far. You know, the first thing is to, you know, check out your neighborhood. If you haven't been supporting your restaurants or your bars, you know, throughout the pandemic, now's a good time.
Yes.
But to explore your neighborhood, get in your car, go away for a day, then spend the night, because it's important to spend the night. Those dollars really go a long way throughout our communities. So first for hospitality and tourism, and then of course our local communities, it really does make a big, big difference.
Yes.
So I want to thank you again, Peggy. It's been
You're
a great
welcome.
time tonight. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you.
Fantastic. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Fabulous.
Thank you.